To Thyroid 101, a beginner's guide to understanding the thyroid. So this is a thyroid guide that I put together after many, many years of learning about the thyroid disease, and every piece that plays a part in why people end up with thyroid problems. One of the reasons I put this together was because the more I worked with clients, the more I was seeing that they were struggling with thyroid problems or endocrine problems, disruption in the hormones and things like that. And the thyroid was really responding to something else going on with people. So, understanding what happens with the thyroid and why it slows down is really important because many, many people will get a thyroid test and it may show an elevated TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone number. And the doctor might automatically assume that they need medication. So instead of going underneath and finding out what's causing that, a client, may just start taking the hormone and never really figure out why it's happening. So while we never ever tell people to go against what their doctor says, it's really important to be educated on the thyroid and all of the pieces that play a part in why someone's thyroid might start to slow down. I'm really a big believer that the thyroid is a victim of a bigger problem. So this guide actually walks you through understanding what those problems could be, what could be causing the thyroid to slow down, and helps you to have a better understanding when maybe you have clients that are presenting with thyroid problems or have already been diagnosed with a thyroid disorder, that you can understand and lead them in the right direction to understanding maybe why it's happening. So I'm going to go through this briefly and give you a general idea of what's contained in this guide. So it is not editable. You cannot fix or change any of the content or information simply because there's a lot of medical terminology in here that I've referenced and resourced, and it's a little bit more of a higher risk area to venture into. So this will be seen as a guide that is general information for you to share with your clients. In no way are you diagnosing or interpreting their labs or anything like that, or acting as a doctor in any way. So just make sure you're familiar with the disclaimer on this first page, where I do obviously emphasize that your client and yourself should seek a thyroid expert for complete education on the endocrine system. And I do provide a link for that in that resource right there. So what can this help you with? This can actually help either you, if you're struggling with thyroid problems, or your clients in understanding all of the intricate pieces that go along with thyroid disease and autoimmunity. So chapter 1 talks about the location of the thyroid and its function. You would be surprised at how many people have no idea where the thyroid is or what it does. And I think it's really important when we're struggling with problems with our health that we understand the body parts, the organs, and the things that are involved. So I've provided a nice diagram here, and talk a little bit about hormone receptors in every cell of the body. And then I go further into more thyroid function resources, which you're going to find throughout this guide, that I am providing you with resources on the most up-to-date information on thyroid disease. Some of the leaders in this area of health and wellness are linked in this guide. So by no means am I an expert in thyroid. I am an expert in researching the thyroid and bringing the people that know this topic to health coaches. So I talk again about what the thyroid is, that some people may consider it the master regulator. Some consider the pituitary, the hypothalamus as that. But one thing that's sure, it is the master metabolic regulator. And I go into pretty good detail on what that means and what thyroid symptoms actually are presented. Many people think that there is a top 10 list of thyroid disease symptoms, and really there's actually so many more than that. There's hundreds. And I actually talk about how many doctors seem to think that a lab report tells the whole story. And I've coined the term. I call this the paper versus the person syndrome, when doctors are trusting a piece of paper, more than they trust a patient's symptoms. So, we help to navigate through what those symptoms might be by providing you with resources for that. And then again, I talk a little bit more about why it's important to know where the thyroid is, the location of the gland in relation to other important parts of the body. And then we really have to dive into autoimmunity, because autoimmunity is underneath almost all thyroid disease. And so I talk about the difference between the two types of thyroid autoimmunity, which is Graves' and Hashimoto's. And of course, provides you with great links that you guys can take this further about what autoimmune disease really is, talk about the genetic components in it. And every single resource in here takes you deeper into understanding what these things are. So this is really a layman's explanation with a little bit of a deeper twist on it for health coaches to understand this topic. So I also provide resources and links to share with your clients if they want to take the autoimmune protocol further in working on their own, repair and remission from it. Here are some resources right here that can actually remove the work for coaches, and you can share these links directly with your clients as well and help them have a deeper understanding of what's going on in their body. Since Graves' disease isn't it is the most common form of hyperthyroidism, but it's not the most common diagnosed thyroid problem. Hashimoto's gets a lot more attention, and I go into great detail about that. So the Graves section is a little bit smaller, but I do provide some great resources for you so you can see the differences. You can take it further. And then, you can find the origin of Graves' disease also, information on that. So then we talk about Hashimoto's and how prevalent it is and exactly, what's happening in the United States and to our population, what the antibodies, elevated antibodies mean, and then a few symptoms here as well. And of course, more resources on Hashimoto's. Some of my favorite people in this are Isabella Wentz, Andrea Nakayama, Stephanie, she's in here. You guys get to take it further by, actually, these books are a lot more in depth, but you get to take it further by choosing which one of these resources may speak to you, and maybe speak to what your client is going through, and share that information with them. So the book You're Not Crazy is found right here as well. There's a longer title to it, but in the interest of keeping it consistent and easy to link to, I've kept the title kind of short there. So I definitely recommend looking into all of these resources. Okay, and that's Stacey Robbins that wrote that book, and it's phenomenal. She's an amazing person. Her story is really an inspiration. So again, talking about antibodies and talking about conventional medical beliefs on testing and doctors and important labs and what's being missed, the standard list of labs, the ones that we should be getting, the ones that we're getting that aren't really helping tell the whole story. So it's really not necessarily, talking about why doctors in conventional medicine are inadequate. It's just that they don't really have the education on the deeper aspects of why further testing is necessary because they weren't taught in medical school. So I talk about, why, we need to educate our doctors as well if they're open to learning why the functional medical approach is so much more, efficient and effective. There's links in here to take it further. So the good news is that, functional medical doctors, naturopaths, chiropractors, and people like that are taking this and running with it in a preventive approach instead of a reactive approach. So there are much more progressive thought thinkers out there right now. And that's something to be hopeful about, that many practitioners are shifting into this thought process. So I also share information about how your client can find doctors. And then I dive into what labs we should be getting for a simple thyroid follow-up or testing protocol, excuse me. All right, so then what do we do with labs once they're received? Since we aren't able to learn all about labs, we aren't doctors, it's not in our scope of profession. I give a lot of great resources for your clients to take it further and for you to walk through these resources with your clients. You will learn about labs on this, but it's not your job to explain a lab. It's your job to walk through it with your client and help them find a better understanding and feel more empowered about the lab results that they're getting back so that they can have an educated conversation with their doctor. Then it's just some tips that people can do at home as well. So once we've kind of gotten an idea of what's going on with the thyroid, we got to think about what other things could be mimicking what's happening with the thyroid. And I call this the masters of mimicry. These are the things that have very similar symptoms in the body to thyroid problems or the thyroid slowing down, but are very different actually. So we're talking about low iron, high estrogen, and adrenal dysfunction. They can all produce very, very similar symptoms. And for example, that might be someone with low iron might lose their hair, and someone with thyroid dysfunction may be losing their hair as well. Someone with high estrogen issues may have fibroids and growths and low energy and weight gain, and people with thyroid problems may have low energy and weight gain. And same thing with adrenal dysfunction as well, low energy, fatigue, things like that. So again, these can be a checklist for narrowing down what could be going on. So I'll, of course, go into depth about why iron is important to the thyroid, why it's crucial to having good thyroid health and conversion of T4 to T3 hormones. And don't be intimidated by these lab comments here. You're going to learn more about what they mean, what T4 to T3 conversion actually means, how to find out more about iron deficiency and ferritin levels, etc. And again, I give you a list of why you should take clients should take their iron testing further than just the ferritin test. And then, of course, we go into the differences in iron, the hem and the non-hem iron resources, and a list of iron-rich foods as well. That's one of the first mimickers of thyroid problems and thyroid symptoms. Sex hormones and are the second part that I like to talk about, because we are being inundated with estrogen everywhere we look, everywhere we breathe, things in the air, things are going in our skin. And estrogen dominance can actually cause the liver to produce high levels of a protein that's called TBG, or thyroid binding globulin, which binds the thyroid hormone, as its name suggests, and decrease that amount of thyroid hormone that can be assimilated and used by the cells. So that affects how your thyroid responds as well, and can cause symptoms. Lots of information in here about sex hormones, progesterone ratios, estrogen, and a sex hormone panel that I believe would be very effective in helping someone figure out what's going on with their hormones, and is it indeed the hormones that are causing the symptoms and causing the thyroid to slow down after all. So we also talk about soy, because that is one of the biggest producers of phytoestrogen. So you can learn all about that in here. So lots of vegans are very high in estrogen in their system, and this page will tell you why. That is one of the reasons why people have thyroid problems, that vegans might run into thyroid issues, is that they are overrun with soy. So I know we've all heard that it is a health food, but studies are showing us that that is not true. So then we move into the third master of mimicry, which is the adrenal glands. And again, I think the adrenal glands are very similar to the thyroid in that they're a victim of something bigger going on. So they're working really hard to help us keep up with stress, and working on helping us to balance things out in our lives. But most of the time, we're turning off that signal and that sign that something's going on. We need to slow down. Something needs our attention, and the adrenal glands are simply responding to the messages that we're sending to it. So the adrenal glands really need attention more than anything before we launch into serious changes or further stress, things that can stress our bodies and our minds even further. So I really believe that we need to learn as much as we can about how to see stress differently, because I don't believe it's possible to actually eliminate stress or even manage it. Truly, I think we need to change the way that we respond to the things that are stressing us out. So an example of that might be, if we are running late for dropping our children off at school, it may be a big stressor for some of us. But if we really tap into that moment that we're feeling that stress, and ask ourselves the question, what's the worst that can happen if I drop my child off late? He's going to get a tardy, and then he's going to get a note in his record. But really, is that an emergency? So changing the way that we see those things and helping our clients to change their perception of stress can really have a big effect on how our adrenals respond. I also give you resources on how to find labs as well. Iodine is a really important mineral, really big piece of thyroid health, but there's a lot of controversy around it. So I share information in here that might help people make a better decision about whether taking iodine is right for them, especially if they have Hashimoto's. So the other thing I like to talk about, let me touch on this briefly, is that iodine testing should be done before iodine supplementation occurs, in my opinion, because if you have adequate amounts of iodine, it's really not necessary to start supplementing with iodine as well. So I give you a resource for finding labs to share with your clients as well. Of course, it's really important that we stress that people with thyroid problems have a good relationship with their doctor, and that they have a doctor that's willing to work with them. So I like to give my clients a form that helps them to get prepared. And I do actually have forms and a template that allows the client to get prepared for the visit. So if you're interested in those, please reach out to me at carmenhunterhealth.com. You can just send a contact form to me and let me know you're interested in those forms. Okay, so I also give you resources for endocrinologists who are the specialists in the endocrine system and thyroid disease on most levels. That's what conventional medicine believes, but I have found that after going to 4 endocrinologists myself, have found better care with a general practitioner on a functional in a functional direction. They seem to understand the whole body more. And that is the approach that we're taking when working with people that have thyroid problems or symptoms of thyroid disease, that we are looking from a head to toe perspective, a functional approach, and finding out why this happened to them in the first place. Then, of course, doctors visit resources. Of course, you can't talk about the thyroid and doctors without talking about medication. So I go into detail about the most prescribed medication or hormone, which is Synthroid. Levothyroxine is the generic brand. And if, talk about also why it's not a bad idea if someone is able to convert T4 into T3, the energy that our cells need. But many times people that have thyroid disease, they get into this position of sickness in their body where their gut is out of whack, their liver is full of toxins, and the conversion takes place in those two areas for the most part. So conversion is really hard for those people. So if they're just taking that one hormone, it's not more than likely going to do them much good. So I talk in detail about that. And I also talk about what to think about with medication, fillers, what to be familiar with about religious beliefs, and articles on choosing medications and where to find them. And then, of course, when we're coaching people that are waiting for thyroid labs, many times they don't believe they should do anything, that they should just wait until the labs come to make a decision. But I disagree with that. I think we need to start moving in the direction, move the needle in the direction of health by making some whole food and lifestyle changes so that we can start to tamper down that immune response that's happening. So I talk about inflammation in the thyroid and go into some details and quote Chris Kresser on his whole section here, which I'm not going to go into because it's a lot of medical talk, but I do reference back to the article. You're more than welcome to take it further there as well. So I provide resources on that, the feedback loop, and other mechanisms that affect the thyroid. And I break down the inflammatory response as well. And again, this is just a glimpse into this guide. There's no possible way to go over all of this. That's why I teach classes on it, and I do mentoring and sessions over this guide to help people better understand it. I also talk a little bit about thyroidectomies, cancer, and nodules as well. Very important topic here to understand that if the thyroid is removed, yes, you still have tissue left in the body, so an immune response can still occur. Lots of information there. So optimal health with thyroid disease. What are the basic steps? So I touch on those. And if you have my food guide, you're already going to have a leg up on helping your clients move in this direction, because I go into all of this stuff about gluten and toxic soy and how to take a 3-step process with it. So lots more information on these health conditions that are causing thyroid problems that you can share with your clients. I talk again about cross-reactive foods that create the same reaction as gluten in the body to the thyroid and why they're so important to remove if you have thyroid problems. And then I give lots of great resources on stress. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, the stress is one of the top things that we need to address, and take it even further, talking about childhood trauma and tips for stress. Of course, exercise is really important, but people with thyroid disease are probably should not be doing endurance exercise. It's very taxing to the body. So I give lots of great resources on that as well. And what can people with thyroid problems be doing? So to wrap it up, obviously, there's so much more that goes into this topic, but I give you so many more resources on what else could be going on, how people can look into the things like viruses, heavy metal toxicity, parasites, pathogens that could be causing the thyroid to slow down. And I give resources on testing and so on. So this is really your one-stop resource for the get started beginner's guide to understanding the thyroid, but I really take it a lot deeper than you can possibly imagine. And there's really no way to know that until you actually get into the guide and start reading. I always refer and defer to my experts. I send people to them constantly. I am not a thyroid expert. I am an expert on researching the thyroid, and want to make really clear that you can be a research expert as well by just looking through this guide and getting familiar with it. So that is an inside peek into the thyroid guide. Of course, join my Facebook group, the Clarity group, and look at ways to join my Health Coach Mentorship and Mastery group that is brand new as of 2017, and reach out if you have any further questions. And of course, make sure to pay attention if you do purchase the guide to the disclaimer here as well. All right, and then there's a small section of the glossary terms. So I hope that was really helpful, and hope that you can have a better understanding of why this thyroid guide can complement your practice and help you to kind of become more proficient in helping people that are dealing with many symptoms that have to deal with thyroid, but could in fact be coming from something else as well.